Hi guys, Andrew with headphones.com. Today I have before me 4 different Bluetooth DAC amp combos, and these are all designed for their portability. And these 4 range anywhere from $100 all the way up to $200, depending on which one you're looking at. We have right here the Fiio BTR5. We have the Qudelix, I think that's how you say it. I'm so sorry for pronouncing this the way that I have. The Qudelix 5K, the iFi Go Blu, and the Radsone ES100 Mark II. Essentially, in this video, we're going to figure out which one is the best for your particular use case. And one of these actually surprised the absolute hell out of me, to the point where I was like actively shocked and told all of my friends like, what? But that also might not be the one that you end up finding the most useful for you. So in this video, we're going to check them out. All right, so before we get going in this video, I'll let you know where all of these were from. All of these, except for the iFi Go Blu, we just bought them. The iFi Go Blu, I believe it's actually a demo unit that was sent over by iFi, so big thanks to iFi for sending that in for evaluation. But the rest we just bought because we wanted to do a comparison. But as you can see, this is a comparison that is based entirely around the form factor. So we're going with, again, the most portable of these types of devices, and there are other devices out there that are like this. These are just the ones that we happen to get in. They're some of the more popular ones available. Now, I want to make one thing clear before going any further, and it's that these all have different specs to one another, and they don't publish them in the same way, which is super annoying. It makes it very difficult to actually cross-compare them. What I did is I actually just tested this with a number of different headphones, both planars and dynamic driver headphones. So the planars would be the lower impedance headphones that are still a little bit on the inefficient side, which would do a little bit better with higher current. And so while the power outputs themselves are different among each of these, it's not as clear as just saying this one has more power and this one has less, because it'll depend a little bit on the types of headphones that are being driven with them and for the volume that you're trying to reach. But you know, there are still some general trends there. Like for example, the most powerful seems to be the iFi Go Blu. This is the one that has the most, I guess, versatility for the inefficient stuff or the hard to drive stuff. The other thing I want to mention is that there are potentially going to be unique characteristics of each of these that I won't be covering in this because they are all extremely feature rich, and I could spend 40 minutes talking about each one of them, especially the ones that have the app and the EQ software. So basically all of them except for the iFi, because there's a lot of functionality that's within those, and depending on what you value and what you're trying to do, that may be more or less valuable to you. So I'm going to really be structuring this around what I found to be the most valuable throughout my testing with each of these. And they're all actually very interesting as far as their functionality is concerned. But let's begin by talking about the form factor, the build quality, the design, and all of that stuff. And I'm going to begin with, just start on my left here. This is the Radsone ES100 Mark II. Now, I actually personally own the original Radsone ES100. I use it all the time. It's my go-to daily portable DAC amp combo, and I use it strictly for IEMs. I don't actually use it for over-ear headphones, but you could. I do still think that there's not that much power available here, not much headroom as far as volume is concerned. And so it is a little bit more better suited for IEMs and just like easier to drive headphones. So with the Radsone ES100 Mark II, it's made of plastic here and it doesn't feel like anything all that substantial, but I can say from experience that these do last a long time, and I'm still on my ES100, works fine, and I just like throw it into my bag and don't think twice about it. Obviously you want to be careful with your expensive stuff, but this is something that I expect to stand the test of time, because mine certainly has, and I am not careful with that at all. So the plastic is not a downside here. It is a very sturdy device. The one thing though that is a little bit odd is that when you shake it, the buttons rattle. So that's a thing. Now you do get a clip. Yay! For me, the clip is essential because I really care about clipping this to my belt loop, and that way I can look really nerdy when I'm walking around at the grocery store with wired IEMs going down to this that's hooked into my belt loop. That's really important to me. The one thing about the ES100 Mark II that is fairly outdated is that it does not have a USB-C input. What? I guess this is a little bit of an older device, and maybe that's why. But yeah, it's definitely not competitive as far as the USB functionality there. It's not USB-C, it's one of the older USB, I believe it's micro USB that hooks into this. Anyways, moving on to the iFi Go Blu, and this is one of the more recent ones. Now, the iFi Go Blu, it looks nice, I'll give it that. It's got these little buttons here that actually also, they look and feel nice. There's a multifunction button for the where the volume knob is, and that knob feel. It's got that knob feel. I'm gonna just, can you hear that? Oh, knob feel. That's your volume, of course. Now, what I don't like about the build quality of the iFi Go Blu is you can maybe see that there's a seam right here between the two pieces. It's just not quite as sleek and tidy as what you get with the other ones. But actually, iFi do give you a nice brown little baggie that you can pop it into, and so that should keep it from getting scratched. So that's nice. And I like the brushed finish here. That looks really nice. The iFi logo is really classy. Now on the iFi Go Blu, you do have USB-C right here, but the big drawback and potential deal breaker for some people is that there is no clip. Come on, guys. You gotta have a clip. Everybody else has a clip. How else are we supposed to embarrass our friends and family when we take these out in public? Come on. That's a joke, guys. They're so inconspicuous you can't even see them. Like, it's fine. Now, moving on to the build of the Qudelix. I'm calling it the Qudelix 5K. This one, it also feels actually quite sturdy. It doesn't feel like this is going to break or get scuffed up or scratched. It feels like sturdy plastic. And you do have a clip, thankfully. Yes, hooray, clip. But the one downside with this one is that the buttons are kind of janky. In general, it's not my favorite design as far as the user experience is concerned with the physical buttons. But as far as the rest of the design here goes, it's solid. You also get USB-C on the back, so that's great. And for these three, I'm going to say that they are all excellent as far as their form factor is concerned. They're all of the smaller variety, of the most portable variety. I think the Radsone ES100 is probably the most desirable because it's the one that's most easily going to fit into a pocket, followed maybe by the Go Blu. The Qudelix, it's also the right size. It's very small, but it's a little bit chunkier, a little thicker than the Go Blu and the ES100. Moving on to the largest of the bunch, or at least the longest of the bunch, it's the Fiio BTR5 right here. Now, the build here is very good. I almost think too good. This is like almost like a glass type finish because there is actually a little display on here as well. It feels the most mature physically out of all of these. It's made out of like more physically robust materials, but at the same time, I also would worry a little bit more about, scratching or having this, smash or crack because it's also a little heavier. And the buttons, they feel great. I have no complaints there, but of course there's no knob feel on like there is on the iFi Go Blu. So if you care about knob feel, the Go Blu is the only option out of all these. But the buttons on the BTR5 are better than the buttons and the interface, the physical interface of the other ones, right? For a lot of them, they do have multifunction buttons, but I like the way that the BTR does it the best. Your volume up and down is also your previous and next track, depending on if you hold it. So that's pretty clever. Now, of course, the BTR5 is the longest of the bunch. So while the BTR5 is still very small and compact and portable, it is the least portable out of the bunch, right? So that's just something to consider. And then the question of the clip, which again, it really matters. I'm sorry, to me, it matters. They do have this little option here. There's no clip on the back of the BTR5, but they give you this little thing that clamps or clasps onto it that does function as a clip. So that's pretty awesome. Now, I briefly want to bring up battery life. On each of these, they have their own indicated spec for battery life, but it's going to change depending on how loud you use it, so the way in which you use it. And so, for example, on the Qudelix, they give you a spec of anywhere from 6 to 20 hours. So I don't know, like, if you're blasting it, at max volume out of the balanced output, you're probably going to get closer to 6. In my testing, though, here's the thing. I never actually had any problem where I would go through a full day and the battery would run out. So it's not really an issue for me with any of these. In general, it's more than enough for the battery life for each of these. If you think about, the duration of your listening. Now, before going any further, let me just quickly talk about the connectivity here. These are all Bluetooth 5.0 except for the Go Blu, which is Bluetooth 5.1. And again, for my use case, that difference didn't matter. They all worked great. They all do LDAC and aptX HD, so no problems there. There is one interesting quirk with the BTR5, and it's that its EQ functionality in the app, for whatever reason, it does not work with LDAC. So that's interesting. Again, not that it really mattered to me, because I could just go to aptX HD and that was fine with my phone. But depends on your needs, right? In any case, let's move on to the amp and DAC sections out of these. And again, it's not at all straightforward how these are going to stack up against one another as far as their power output is concerned, practically speaking. So in practice, you get more headroom on the iFi Go Blu than any of the others. By a noticeable margin. Now keep in mind that these all have single-ended outputs and balanced outputs. On the Go Blu, it is a 4.4 Pentacon for the balanced, and on the other ones, it's 2.5 millimeter. And so if you have a headphone that you're trying to drive that is a higher impedance headphone or a more inefficient headphone, really the only option here that I would suggest is the Go Blu. Now let me talk about the DACs that are going on in each of these. So with the ES100, this is one of the remaining AKM chips. I don't know how long this is going to be in circulation with an AKM chip because there was a factory fire, and so there's going to be a little bit of a delay there for them to get that up and running if they're able to. I hope they are. So on the ES100, it's an AK4375, and then on the Qudelix 5K and the BTR5, you have the ES9218 chips, the ESS chips in here. And I didn't have any issues with, you know, the sort of saber glare that people talk about whatsoever there. So that's great. Maybe somebody hears a difference, but I couldn't hear a difference. And then with the iFi Go Blu, this is using a Cirrus Logic chip. And that's interesting to me because iFi normally goes with their Burr Brown. So I'm very curious as to why they've gone with the Cirrus Logic now. Nonetheless, let's move on to sound quality as far as the DACs and the amps are concerned. Do they sound any different from one another? You know, maybe on Tuesdays, the iFi Go Blu sounds better. And then on, you know, Friday evening, it's actually the BTR5 that sounds better. But then, you know, Saturday morning, maybe I'm a little bit hungover and I'm like, you know what? I want that AKM, that velvet sound. So I'm gonna go back to that ES100, you know, and then that one's gonna sound better. No, they all sound fine. See, these are the types of considerations that I really don't think matter when you're faced with a choice for each of these because of the other features that they have, which in my view are so much more important. So let me be clear here. All of these, as far as their sound quality is concerned, for the DAC and the amp in here, they're all just trying to get to the good enough territory, and I think they all do. They're not trying to be the thing that is like, you're gonna get the absolute most top tier level thing sound out of your headphones that you have, right? That's not what these are about. These are about, you know, portability, form factor, and generally they all sound great. So let's get into that now, and this is really where it starts to matter which one you choose because they do have a little bit different functionality going on. So I'm actually going to bracket the iFi Go Blu away from these other ones here because this is the first major point of differentiation among these, and is that the iFi Go Blu is not a device that's meant to be used with an app. This is something where you just push a button and it changes things. Now, there are people who prefer this, and there are also people who prefer using the app on their smartphone and using, you know, the app functionality with each of these other ones because they are much more customizable than what you get with the iFi Go Blu. With the iFi Go Blu, it's more of a, I'm gonna go for a walk down the street or wherever, I'm gonna go, you know, somewhere, and I don't wanna think about an app. I want to just put it in my pocket and I want to push a button and go. So the way that they've set this up is that you can push the button here and it'll change the analog function that you get. The X bass on the iFi Go Blu is it's actually pretty clever. I'm often worried about how bass boosts are done because they frequently boost way too high into the upper bass, and that can be a little bit overbearing. It can be a little bit much. And with the iFi Go Blu's X bass, it's done in a way that boosts much more incrementally towards the sub bass, so you get way more boost in the sub bass than you do in the mid bass and the upper bass. In the sub bass, it's upwards of like 8.5, 9 dB, like between 8 and 9 dB bass boost, you know, for those like 20 hertz frequencies, which is just ridiculous. It's just crazy. But you can see it tapers down and comes down, you know, to an appropriate spot. And it's not going to cause any bleed in between the upper bass and the mids, depending on the headphones that you're using with it, of course. That's always the big thing there. But this is a much more sub-bass focused lift than what I was expecting. So that's very good. The one consideration here, though, with the X bass is that it's not a bass shelf. It's just a gradual rise all the way up into the sub-bass. So it's cool, and I think it's actually effective with, if you think about the way that, you know, most headphones are in the bass, like for open back headphones, open back dynamic driver headphones, and planars, there are physical limitations to those headphone designs that make it so it's not possible for them to have the kind of bass elevation in the sub bass that you might want. So it's kind of funny when I'm evaluating headphones and I'm measuring them and showing the measurements against a target where the target elevates in the bass. There's no reason for me to expect that open back headphones, whether Plano or dynamic, are going to have that exact bass shelf or that bass lift, especially down in the sub bass frequencies. And the iFi Go Blu can definitely give you that if you use the X bass function. So that's great. And yes, that's also a reason why I really recommend learning to EQ. But yeah, with open back ones, that's where the iFi Go Blu really, I see the strength for that bass lift. Or just if you have headphones or IEMs that don't have a bass boost and you're wondering how it would sound with a bass boost, especially for the sub bass, then that's what you would use. Then there are two other functions. The next one, that you push the button again, you get the X space function. And what this does is it kind of tries to give you an extra sense of space and openness and air. It just sort of counterclockwise tilts the whole thing, giving you a little bit more, upper mids and treble and a little bit less bass. And there is a sense in which a change to the frequency response like this has that, can lead to that experience. So it's still definitely an interesting and worthwhile function. And then even more interesting is the next function here where you hit it again and it combines the two. It gives you a bass boost, a bass lift, and extra upper mids and treble. Now for me, the key thing here, apart from the spatial advantages that you might get with X space, perceptually, is that you get 3 tuning presets basically. So you can, whatever headphones you have, you can just hit the X bass if you just want extra bass. But then if you want to, brighten things up or make things more V-shaped, you have options for that as well. Now, let me actually start with the BTR5 because the app functionality here, while good, it is in third place here of these 3. What's good about this is that you get EQ sliders, so you can make your adjustments there. You can't manually input the specific values on where you want to make your adjustments, so you can't go that fine-grained, but it's still good enough. And then you also get the ability to select, at least this is what's important to me because there's a whole bunch of additional functionality here. What's important to me is the ability to select charge, input priority, or Bluetooth priority. So for example, if I have this plugged into my computer, I can still be listening to music through Bluetooth on my phone. And then if I want to, I can just switch that over and use it on my computer if I want to as well. Now in second place for app functionality is the ES100 Mark II. And the reason this is a little bit ahead of the BTR5, even though the interface doesn't feel as fully featured, is because the EQ function here is a little bit more sophisticated in the sense that you can choose the Q value of your filters. Now, what is the Q value? So basically, whatever filter adjustment you're making in your EQ, you can make that a very specific and narrow filter, or you can make it a wide, gradual, wider range filter. And so that's basically that. You have 2 values for that, wide or medium, on the ES100 Mark II, and that means that you can be a little bit more precise with where you're making your adjustments. So that's useful, but I gotta say, nothing comes close to the functionality that you get with the Qudelix 5K. And when I was doing my evaluation of these, this is the one that I ended up using last, and I went, oh my God. So what you get with this is you get all the EQ functionality that you get with the other 2. It's also a very robust and feature-rich interface, but in addition to the regular EQ functionality that you get with the other 2, on the Qudelix 5K, you also get parametric EQ. And what that means is you can be far more surgical with where you're making your adjustments. I actually noticed on the other 2, there was no option for making a 5K adjustment, and that's typically something that I adjust on most headphones that I listen to because I'm sensitive to that region. You can only really do 4K on these. And on the Qudelix, you can do whatever frequency you want. You can make whatever adjustment you want. This is basically like having equalizer APO in your pocket. And I know there are other apps that you can use on phones that allow you to do similar kinds of things, but nothing was as elegant as what this one had for that functionality. You can customize literally everything. I can't think of any other thing that I would want as far as the EQ functionality here. Like you can, not only is it like the ability to change and input values manually for which frequencies you want to adjust and the level that you want to adjust them to, you can also specify the type of filter. So if you want to have a peak filter versus a shelf filter, you name it, it's all there. And you can be as granular as you want. Now there's more. And this is where things really blew my mind with the Qudelix 5K. This has all of the auto EQ Jaakko Pasanen's auto EQ presets built in by default. I was like, what? Wait, what? I thought it was like auto EQ as in like doing some weird function to like automatically adjust like what some presets might be. And then I started scrolling down and I was like, wait, this is all of Crin's data. It's got all of Oratory's data. What? So they really are paying attention to the community with this one. They basically baked that in, and now you have presets for so many headphones, meaning that you don't have to bother doing the EQ. And this is the thing, like if you're gonna bother doing EQ, there's probably a reason why, and it's because you're trying to improve the sound quality to one degree or another. And again, this is where a device like this is very different from a device like the iFi Go Blu, where it's just like hit a button and off you go. It's like you love the headphones that you have, you just want more bass because you're out and about and there's other sounds out there that are competing for your attention and you want the bass to be the thing that dominates, and then you hit the bass boost function and then that's it. With the Qudelix, you're like, okay, I am looking for something to improve the frequency response of the headphones that I have, and make it perfect. That's really what the Qudelix is about. Now, with that said, there are some huge caveats that need to be applied to this device and the use of auto EQ and the more granular approach. And it's that for all of the presets that exist here, and indeed any preset that you're using when it comes to EQ, you run the risk of actually making things worse, because there is such a thing as unit variation with headphones. Not a lot. And it's often, there's a general trend, but the more granular you get, the more specific you get with your adjustments, the more you risk actually hitting something that is just wrong. When it works, it really works. Like the headphones that I happen to be listening to with this, it nailed it, because I guess it was pretty close to the particular unit that I had. But that might not be the case for you. Like you can't have super tight unit consistency tolerances for frequency response when you're dealing with certain types of materials like pads, and the more the pads have an impact, the more room there is for variation. And so with some headphones that have this type of variation, you got to be a little bit more careful with these profiles. And I would almost suggest, instead of using the profiles, try using the profile as a starting point and then going, okay, how would I change this? Use your ears. Like that's my cautionary tale here. My advice here is, yes, the profiles are great, and that's the reason to buy this, in my opinion, because man, is that ever useful. But also use your ears. Make sure that it actually is doing the things that you want it to do. Now, the second caveat here, and this is potentially a bigger one for anybody who knows about auto EQ. If you're not at all interested in the kind of sound quality that is, let's say, closer to common targets, like the ones that we use, if you prefer more esoteric tunings, then the benefits of something like this are a little bit lost on you. And you might be more suited to going with something like this, the iFi Go Blu. But again, the way I look at this is that it's an option. The profiles, you don't have to use them. You can just go into the parametric EQ and just add the same bass shelf that you would get with the Go Blu here, or a more specific bass shelf, because again, it's not a bass shelf, it's just a rise on this one. Or if you're more treble sensitive, you can downshelf the treble. You can be as surgical or as wide as you want with a Qudelix. And that is functionality that I've not seen in any of these other devices so far. So what's the takeaway here? Which one is the best? Which is the one that I'm going to recommend the most? Well, I'm going to recommend two of these, because I kind of think that of these three app-based DAC amp, Bluetooth DAC amp combos, I kind of think that the Qudelix 5K runs away with it. It has a form factor that is competitive, and then it's got that crazy EQ functionality in the app with all the profiles, auto EQ profiles, that makes everything super easy for you. And so in some ways, I kind of see the Fiio BTR5 and the ES100 as borderline redundant. While they're both great devices, and I'm going to recommend both of them, I think they're both excellent, there's no scenario at this point where I would take either of these over the Qudelix 5K. The iFi Go Blu is a different enough of a device that for those people who hate EQ, and I know those people exist, I know you're out there, and I know you're watching, and I know you're cringing. The iFi Go Blu is exactly the kind of device that's going to make you happy. It makes things, in general, simpler. It's fewer things to mess with, fewer things to learn. If you just want to grab your headphones or IEMs and add a bass boost, something like that, and off you go and not think about it, that's really what this is for. Plus the added power benefits. So I think you guys get a sense of how I see these different devices. For me, it's like these two are the winners. They're the most competitive for their specific thing. And, you know, by a country mile, the Qudelix is the most useful. It's just, it doesn't have quite the power output that you get from the Go Blu. And actually, if you guys own one of these devices and you have another reason for preferring it or using it over the one that I would pick, the Qudelix 5K, just let me know in the comments, because I'm very curious to kind of hear what other people's use cases are. Because again, like, the way that I use this stuff isn't necessarily the way that you would use it, or that, you know, everybody uses it. It's just like the functionality there makes so much sense to me on the Qudelix 5K that I don't really see why I would go with any of the other ones, unless I had specific power requirements that only the Go Blu could satisfy. But that does it for this video. Thanks for taking the time to watch it, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye for now.